Hi everyone and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories out there. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, friend. In this video, we're diving into 3 stories of people who ventured out onto the roads of Appalachia and ended up facing some truly terrifying moments. I'll admit, driving at night is one of my favorite things to do. And the more remote the road, the better. There's something about that quiet calm mixed with the kind of horror we're about to hear that for me is just incredible. I hope you enjoy these stories as much as I did exploring them. And most of all, I hope they keep you up at night. As always, thank you so much for being here and for keeping this channel alive. Your support means more than you could ever imagine. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's head back into the mountains. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. About 4 years ago, something happened to me and my friends that still makes no sense. We had just finished college and had been talking for months about a road trip through several states. Our car was packed with everything we thought we might need. Tents, extra fuel, a first aid kit, anything to get by. The plan was to alternate nights in tents with nights in cheap places so we could stretch what little money we had. By the 7th day, we crossed into West Virginia. And I have to admit, that state made me nervous and excited at the same time. There was a lot we wanted to see and some trails to hike. But we also knew we needed to be careful. The night everything happened, we were supposed to sleep in tents. But Joan was jittery, convinced we were being followed. That morning, we had done a short hike and a man kept approaching us and staring at her. It got to the point where Mark lost his temper and told him to get lost. But after that, Joan never really shook the feeling. We left the trail early because I saw the man hiding in the trees only a few feet away. We called the police and were told there was nothing they could do. The man hadn't actually hurt anyone. He had just been acting strange. It's absurd that something really wrong usually has to happen before the police act. But we left the trail and kept driving. From time to time, we thought we saw the same battered pickup. But pickups were common there. So nervous as we were, we tried to ignore it. I was driving that day and at some point I became certain we were being followed. I could have said something, but the mood in the car had lightened a bit and even Joan was smiling. So, I pretended I was testing the car and managed to shake whoever was behind us. 2 hours after that, it was fully night. And when it gets dark, there it gets really dark. I was tired and it started raining heavily out of nowhere. That was supposed to be a tent night, but none of us felt like setting up tents in the rain, and Joan said she didn't feel comfortable sleeping exposed in a tent that night. I agreed, mainly because I was the only one who had really registered that we'd been followed by that creep. We decided, reluctantly, to all sleep in the car. The next day, we were booked into an Airbnb for 2 nights and figured we could rest properly. Then, we looked for a spot off the road and found a semi-clearing that gave us some privacy. After we parked, I don't remember much because I was genuinely exhausted. I woke in the middle of the night to what I thought was a scream. It took a moment to come fully awake and realize I was alone in the car. The back door was open and the forest beyond was absolute black. The idea of stepping out terrified me, but the thought of my friends heard and needing help scared me even more. Music, my phone said 3:12 a.m. I turned on the flashlight and opened the car door. From somewhere in the dark, I heard something like running. I started walking toward it and then heard Joan answer when I called them back. Her voice soaked in panic, begging for help. I ran without thinking and almost ran into her. In her fear, she struck me with her phone, thinking I was the one after her. She was breathing in a way I'd never heard, frantic and out of control, and said that she and Mark had been attacked by a man she didn't know, that they had run in different directions. When I stood up, I saw a silhouette between the trees and the man started running toward us. Joan grabbed me and screamed for me to run. I had no idea who he was, but I knew at that speed he would catch us. I told her to grab the first log she could and I did the same. Then without planning to, I ran straight at him. I think I caught him by surprise. He didn't expect us to fight back and I struck him in the head, sending him to the ground. Joan joined in and brought down a heavy branch on his stomach hard enough to knock the wind out of him. The branch snapping in two under the force. I hit him again in the head, and this time it was enough to render him unconscious. Only then did we see his face beneath a black mask. It was the same man we had seen on the trail. How he had found us out in the middle of nowhere was impossible to understand. I had shaken whoever was following us, but there was no time to ponder it. We ran like mad, driven by pure adrenaline. We found Mark at the side of the car, semi-conscious with a huge gash on his head. He had been attacked and somehow dragged himself there, but he needed a hospital. He had lost a lot of blood and couldn't even remember his own name. The nearest hospital was 57 minutes away. I tried to get there faster, but the car was old and sluggish, and no matter how hard I pushed it, it wouldn't respond. The drive felt endless. We didn't know how bad he really was, and we were both wrecked. At one point, the shadow of a tree from the passing light made me flinch so hard I nearly had an accident. When we finally arrived, they ran a battery of tests, and a scan showed he had an intracranial hematoma and needed several days of rest to recover. The police were called and they went to the clearing. But as always, what gets me is that there was nobody there by the time they arrived. I know this sounds awful, but part of me wanted the man to still be there. I think anyone who has been through that understands the angry logic behind that feeling. He had vanished and was free to keep terrorizing people however he wanted. More than fear. What I felt afterward was anger. It infuriates me that people are capable of that kind of cruelty. And it infuriates me that the police so often wait for something extreme to happen before they take action. It angers me that a good person's life can be turned upside down in an instant, and that the person responsible can walk away into the night. It was late October of 2019, and I was driving alone from Roanoke, Virginia down toward Asheville, North Carolina. I had left after work thinking I could handle the 5-hour drive in one shot. But by the time I hit the Blue Ridge Parkway, it was already well past dark. I don't know if you've ever driven those roads at night, but the mountains seem endless and the forest swallows the light. I barely saw more than what my high beams cut through and the occasional curve warning sign. Honestly, I've always loved driving at night, but that place is on a whole different level. It's not just nighttime. It's pitch black. Sometimes it gets so dark you can't see a thing beyond what your headlights are hitting. I hadn't passed another car for nearly 40 minutes when I noticed my gas gauge dipping lower than I was comfortable with. My GPS showed a gas station about 10 miles off the main road. So, I took the exit. That exit road was narrow, twisting, and completely empty. It felt like the kind of place where if something went wrong, no one would know for hours. That was exactly my kind of thinking, and that's why it was super rare for me to head out into a part of the country like that without carrying extra gas. But without getting into too many personal details this time, it just hadn't been possible. As I was driving, I couldn't shake the thought that things could go south really fast. I kept trying to push it out of my mind and focus on something else. I don't really believe we can manifest our reality in every situation, but I wasn't about to test that theory. So, I figured I'd play it safe and think about something positive instead. The gas station finally came into view. It was one of those old rundown places with only 2 pumps, no bright signage, no big convenience store attached, just a small building with a flickering light. One of the pumps was out of order, taped up with a plastic bag over the nozzle. The other seemed to work, so I pulled in. I swear I'm not trying to give you some cliché picture of a gas station in the middle of nowhere. It really did look exactly the way I described it. It was only then that I noticed a single vehicle parked off to the side of the building, hidden from the view of the road. An older red SUV with no front plate. Right away. That set off alarms in my head. Whenever you see a car without plates, it's usually one of 2 things. Either something just happened and the person's genuinely dealing with it, or more often, they're trying to hide something. Out there, the second option felt way more likely. Still, I didn't want to start spiraling or planting suspicion in my own head. So, I told myself maybe it belonged to some local who was inside paying cash. I swiped my card, started pumping gas, and kept scanning the Trian. It was dead quiet except for the ticking of the pump. Then, I heard gravel crunching. I snapped my head toward the sound and caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A man walking out from behind the SUV toward me. He wasn't carrying anything and he definitely wasn't smiling. His clothes were dirty. He had on work boots and his hair looked like it hadn't been cut in years. I kept telling myself he was just some local guy, probably exhausted from a long shift and just wanting to get home. I gave him a quick smile and a small nod to acknowledge him. He didn't say a word. He just walked past the front of my car, glanced at me once, and then drifted around toward the passenger side. My throat went dry. I only had a pocket knife in the car. The pump clicked off, and I yanked it out without finishing, slamming the nozzle back in place. When I looked up, he was standing about 10 feet from my car, angled toward the passenger door like he was about to open it. I asked if he needed help with something. And without even thinking, I blurted out that I was armed. I hadn't planned to say it. It just came out. His silence felt like a threat, so I immediately jumped into the driver's seat and locked the doors. He didn't flinch, didn't react, just stared at me through the glass like he was sizing me up. I honestly couldn't read him. I didn't know if he had some kind of problem and needed help, if he was there with bad intentions, or if he was completely strung out and just incapable of responding. All I knew was that no matter how confident I usually feel in my own abilities, my heart was pounding with every possible scenario running through my head. Without giving it another thought, I turned the key through the car in reverse. I needed to get the hell out of there. I was just about to hit the edge of the gas station when I caught movement near the tree line. Another man standing there half hidden in the dark. No flashlight or phone light. I floored it, cut the wheel hard, and shot back onto the road, my tires spitting gravel in every direction. In my mirror, I saw both of them, one slowly walking back toward the SUV and the other stepping fully out of the trees. They weren't rushing. And for some reason, I felt like they didn't need to. It was like they'd done this before. And they knew all they had to do was wait for the right person to hesitate. But I was wrong. They didn't need to wait for anyone else. They just needed to know I had been there. Not even 2 miles out from the gas station, I saw a car blocking the road. Another SUV. Music in that moment, I knew it was a trap. I didn't know why, but they wanted to catch me. The SUV completely cut off the road, and I couldn't see what was beyond it. It was too dark. I had 2 options. Stop the car and face whatever was waiting. Turn around and head back toward where the other 2 were probably still lurking, or risk driving along the edge of the road. I could hit a tree. I could fall off a cliff. At that point, none of it mattered. Whatever was out there had to be better than what those men wanted from me. I slammed the accelerator. Just as I got close enough to see the terrified face of the guy who probably thought I was going to crash into them, I jerked the wheel to the left and cut completely off the road. The brush was low, but the car struggled. I heard something hit the underside, probably a fallen log. Back on the road, I floored it. I saw them get back into their SUV in my rear-view mirror, and I knew no matter what happened that night, I needed to call the police. I explained to the dispatcher what was happening, exactly where I was, that I was being pursued. And then just like that, the lights from the car chasing me went out. I couldn't see them anymore. I followed the operator's directions and made it to the nearest town, just 3 miles away, where the police station was. I filed a report and was assured there would be an investigation. But the reality, I'm almost certain of one of 2 things. Either what happened was already known to the police, or the version I want to believe. The group chasing me had access to police communications and heard me call it in. That would explain why they gave up less than a minute after I called. Since then, I've never driven without extra gas in the tank. And I've certainly never ventured down a road that clearly looks like it could serve as a hideout for people like that. 2 years ago in the early fall of 2023, something bizarre happened to me near the Blue Ridge Mountains. Before I tell you exactly what went down that night, I need to give you the context of my life and the slow collapse that led me there. Because without that, you won't understand how fragile and exhausted I was when everything snapped. My wife died 5 years ago giving birth to our daughter. I have to confess that for a long time I was a terrible father. Grief made me selfish, and bluntly I couldn't see that there was now a little person depending on me for everything. For the first years of Claire's life, I was absent in a way that felt inevitable to me at the time. About 3 years ago, I finally accepted help and started seeing a therapist. And slowly, I promised myself I would try to be different. I made a commitment to spend as much time as possible with her. My parents live in another state, and because they have limited mobility, they had never met Claire. Part of my healing was letting them back into our life. So on that autumn trip, when I managed to get a few days off work, I decided to take a road trip with Claire so she could meet her grandparents. It should have been simple, but I did not reckon with how much harder traveling with a small child is. And by the night in question, I was shredded. It was raining like hell, and we'd been on that lonely Blue Ridge Road for hours. It was well past midnight, and we still had at least an hour before the hotel. Claire, sensing my exhaustion and my short temper, was miserable and cried for reasons I couldn't soothe. I wanted to get to the hotel as fast as I could, but with the downpour and the pitch-black road and a baby in the back, I had to keep the speed down. There is another thing about me that matters to this story. 7 years ago, I had surgery, and since then, I've dealt with urinary incontinence. Not always, but often enough that when the urge hits, I have to stop. That night, the urge was overwhelming. I tried not to pull over on that stretch because the forest was black as tar. Claire would not stop crying despite everything I tried. The urge won, and I parked and ran off into the trees to pee. That is when, between the trunks and the sheets of rain, I thought I saw a light. A small steady glow pushed back in the trees. Curiosity or stupidity took me a few yards away from the car to see what it was. While I was there, I admit something I hate about myself. Part of me wanted the crying to stop. For a second, the noise of her sobbing was a blade on my nerves. I stepped farther from the car to escape it. And then the crying stopped. Relief hit me first, sharp and shameful, but it was instantly replaced by terror so raw I cannot shake it from my mind. I ran back toward the car with my heart pounding. Through the rain, I saw the back of someone bolting away with Claire in their arms, the passenger door wide open, and the figure cutting through the storm with my child pressed against them. I don't know what took over me. I screamed so loud it scared me, and I sprinted after them. It was impossible to make sense of anything in the dark. The rain was deafening. All I could hear was soil and water underfoot and the rustle of wet fabric. When the figure realized I was gaining on them, they simply dropped my daughter onto the ground and kept running. There was no time to think. Panic swallowed me whole, and she lay limp in my arms, unresponsive. I couldn't know if she'd been hit, drugged, or worse. I ran back to the car and floored the accelerator. The route that should have taken 45 minutes somehow took 27. Every second was an eternity. When we pulled into the emergency room, she began to open her eyes, but she was groggy and barely responsive. The tests showed she had a head injury. Not massive, but enough to knock a child that small out cold. The police were called. For a while, I think they suspected me. How could they not when I had been the one to stop the car and walk away? After interviews and after seeing how raw my panic was, they seemed to accept my version. They told me the area was searched and patrolled for 2 days. But the woods are endless, and whoever had been there disappeared into that dark. I have replayed every detail 1,000 times. The absurd coincidence of someone being exactly where I stopped. The light in the trees that drew me away. The speed with which they grabbed and ran. Every decision is a knife. But what keeps me awake at night more than the image of my child on the ground is the guilt that eats me. The fact that I wanted her to be quiet, that I left the car open, that I felt relief when her crying stopped. Those shameful feelings make me physically ill because nothing erases them. I do not know who the person was. I do not know if they watched us before we stopped or if they were simply there. Sometimes I think about how precise the whole thing felt. Other times I tell myself it was a stupid, terrifying coincidence. But the doubt which is worse than any answer is that in a single stupid decision to step into the trees, I handed my child over to the unknown. And even though she survived and the doctor said she will be fine, the memory of what I allowed to happen sits heavy in me like a stone I cannot throw away.